Ever had that gut feeling something's about to go wrong, even when you've got zero reason to think that way? That's basically what happened to Maxx Crosby. He was already in Baltimore, already picturing himself in a New Jersey, and out of nowhere this feeling just started hitting him hard. And get this, a few days later, the whole thing fell apart, and he was back with the Raiders without ever suiting up for the Ravens. Here's the thing nobody knew until now: what was actually going through his head during those days. For the first time, Crosby opened up and laid out in full detail what he really felt. And there's a part of this confession that's going to leave you speechless. Stick with me till the end, because the reason behind all of this is way more surprising than it looks. You know that feeling when something's going to go wrong before it even happens? That's pretty much what Maxx Crosby lived through. He was already in Baltimore, already moved in, already part of the Ravens' daily routine, and still something inside him kept saying this wasn't going to last. It wasn't some vague hunch either. It was almost an uncomfortable certainty he carried around without being able to fully explain it. And when that kind of feeling comes from an athlete who's already been through so much pressure on and off the field, it carries even more weight. What stands out is that Crosby made a point of framing this as a trait of his, not something he made up after the fact to sound prophetic. He said he's always had this ability to read a room, to pick up on when something feels off before any real sign shows up. That instinct kicked back in right there, inside the very city limits that were supposed to become his new home, and even he was surprised by how strong the feeling hit him. One thing he was careful to point out is that this uneasy feeling had nothing to do with the Ravens as an organization. It wasn't rejection of the team, and it wasn't discomfort with the people there. It was more a sense that this particular moment in his career just wasn't going to stick the way it was laid out. Like there was another path already forming in the background that he couldn't quite see yet. And the wildest part is watching how that gut feeling lined up perfectly with what came next. While he was still trying to settle into a new routine, a new city, a different locker room, that uneasy feeling kept pulsing underneath it all, almost like a quiet warning. And the real reason behind it showed up way faster than he expected, coming from a direction nobody saw coming. It was a shock that came way too fast to ever feel normal. Just days after Crosby was announced, the front office took a closer look at the defensive end's medical exams and didn't like what they found. That's the detail, not scheme fit, not contract terms, not any adjustment issue, that made the front office pump the brakes before the deal even had a chance to fully take shape, catching plenty of people inside the organization off guard. You can picture the mood inside the building in that moment. A huge addition to the pass rush, announced with real excitement from the fan base, and suddenly everything grinding to a halt over a medical report. There was no bad practice, no controversial interview, no messy locker room drama. It was simply a clinical report that made the Ravens pull back within hours, shutting down an expectation that had barely had time to breathe. What really stands out is how fast the decision came together. There was no dragged-out back-and-forth stretching over weeks, no waiting period to reassess with a cool head. The moment the issue showed up in the exams, Baltimore responded almost instantly, which says a lot about how seriously the front office treats any physical red flag, even when there's real excitement around a big name walking through the door. And it was that sudden ending that left everyone with that nagging, so close feeling. A player who actually put on the team's colors, but who never once stepped onto the field actually representing the franchise. And that's exactly the kind of twist that makes the next chapter, with Crosby heading back to the Raiders, even more interesting to dig into. While all of this was playing out, Crosby said his phone genuinely wouldn't stop buzzing with news about the Raiders stacking up the roster in free agency. That detail shows a side of this whole stretch that's easy to miss. While Baltimore was still working to the medical situation, Las Vegas was already thinking ahead about what it would do if the pass rusher ended up back on the team. You can imagine how strange that must have felt. A player technically already belonging to the Ravens, watching his old team move like he was coming back any minute. That kind of contradiction is exactly what had Crosby laughing, almost in disbelief, about the irony of the whole situation. Like the universe already knew something he was still trying to process himself. He even said he couldn't turn on the TV without running into some headline about the Raiders putting together one of their best off-seasons in years, bringing in name after name to strengthen multiple spots on the roster. And every time that happened, the same nagging question kept hitting him. Why now of all times? It was a stretch full of mixed signals, with Baltimore still working to the medical results while the situation out in Las Vegas was already pointing in a completely different direction. And that contrast helps explain why, not long after, everything wrapped up the way it did. It might be a hard pill to swallow, but Crosby was pretty direct about not holding any grudge over how it all played out. He didn't treat the whole episode as a personal issue with the Baltimore organization. He saw it more as a sequence of events that just needed to run its natural course, even if the ending wasn't what Baltimore was hoping for when it first announced a trade. That calm way of processing everything says a lot about how he handles decisions that are completely out of his hands. Instead of treating the exit from Baltimore like some kind of setback, he chose to see it as a normal part of a career full of twists, with no room for resentment toward the team that had publicly welcomed him as a new addition. And what really stands out is that same calmness on the other side of the whole situation. While there's a bitter taste left behind from a deal that never got finished, for Crosby it just became another chapter in a season full of turns, with no emotional weight held against a franchise that almost brought him in. That contrast between the two sides, the emptiness left behind on one end and Crosby's peace of mind on the other, helps paint a clearer picture of where the team stands now in its search for defensive reinforcements and what could still happen down the line involving his name.
If you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help the purple flock grow.
On the other side of all this, there's now that lingering what-if feeling. Crosby was only off the roster for a few days, but that was enough to show exactly the kind of piece the Ravens had in their hands and ended up losing over the medical exams. Meanwhile, he's back with the Raiders, helping build out a defense strengthened by other free agency additions throughout the offseason. This whole situation works almost like a reminder of how quickly behind-the-scenes deals can slip out of control. There was no evaluation mistake on the field, no messy contract issue to sort out. It was a single medical detail that shut the door before it ever really opened, taking away the team's shot at reinforcing the pass rush with a player of Crosby's caliber at that exact moment. And here's what makes it even more interesting. Even with the deal falling apart, the situation isn't fully closed. There's still a real chance a trade involving Crosby could resurface before or during the season, meaning his name could end up tied to the Ravens again at some point down the road, depending on how things unfold out in Las Vegas. So that question lingers heading into the next few months. Does Baltimore go after another name to fill that gap on defense? Or does it wait to see if this chapter with Crosby gets a second shot at reopening later in the season? This brief stretch Crosby spent connected to Baltimore left behind more questions than answers. The pass rusher actually put on the team's colors, felt the weight of the city, and watched it all fall apart over a detail nobody saw coming. The confession he's making now only backs up just how real that strange gut feeling was, even without any logical explanation at the time. And what lingers behind is that sense of a missed opportunity. The Ravens came close to landing one of the league's best pass rushers to boost the defense, and the deal slipped away by the thinnest of margins. Meanwhile, Crosby is settled in with the Raiders, completely at peace with how it turned out, and there's still a chance this whole thing pops back up on the radar at some point this season. So here's something to think about. Does Baltimore go after another name to fill that gap on defense? Or does it wait to see if this chapter with Crosby still has a shot at reopening down the line? And what about you? What do you think the Ravens should do from here? Drop your take in the comments.
And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out, and I'll see you in the next video.